recording. And then I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get started. All right, share screen. All right. Let me know whether or not you all can see that.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
Cool. All right. So let me make sure we are going to do this. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started with this virtual event. So you want to get into DevOps. My name is Greg Greenlee. I am the founder of the Blackstone Technology organization. So I want to welcome everybody to Blackstone Technology Cincinnati event. That's where I'm from, born and raised here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so today we have three panelists. We have a late addition and Herman Haggerty. He's going to be joining us as well. Kind of uh, did my Photoshop skills is to put him in. Everybody else are has the circles and he's got the square. So
It
I,
looks good to me.
okay, that's all that matters. So we're going to be talking to three of our panelists. I was really excited about this topic since I work as a senior DevOps engineer here in Cincinnati for a company called Insight. And it's just one of those things to where, people, I have people coming up to me all the time saying they're interested, but they don't know where to start and how to get into DevOps or what it's all about. So I thought it would be really good to have three people from the Bit community, chime in. We can ask some questions about their journeys, about what it means for them to be in DevOps, and really get their point of view on it. So Tameika Reed, she's the founder of Women in Linux. So thanks, Tameika, for joining us. Herman Haggerty, I already shouted him out. And Michael Jenkins, he currently, can we say who you work for or no? I don't
Oh,
know if that's,
yeah, you could say who I work for.
all
It's
right.
fine.
You still work for Disney, right?
I am. Yeah,
Okay,
still with
so
Disney.
works for Disney, 20 years in the game, and he's going to be bringing his insights to this discussion as well. So a little bit about Blackstone Technology before we get started. We've been around since 2008, 2009. We started as just an online community. We had forums, we had IRC, we had all types of things going on back in the days. Kind of graduated or evolved from that to Slack, where we are now. So if you want to join our Slack channel, we have 4,600, 4,700 people on our Slack channel. I'm looking now
Sounds
just to verify.
sounds about right. Yeah.
Where's the numbers at? Okay. So I
Yeah.
can't see. Oh, 47, 4719. So 4,719 people in our Slack channel. If you want to join, just go to blacksandtechnology.net. And at the bottom, you'll see the icon for Slack. You'll have to fill out a very short form. We gather some data just to keep up on our demographics, and then it'll send you an automatic invite for that. So our mission is to increase the representation and participation of Black people in the technology industry. We also have a 501c3 nonprofit, Bit Foundation. You can find that at foundation.blacksandtechnology.net. That's where all of our chapters are run up underneath. In the past, we ran BitCon, which is our annual tech conference, under that as well. And we have free membership. So members receive discounts, training, certifications. We're in the process of adding more and more partners to our membership, so that we can add value and resources to our membership. Our members, I should say. So technical products, services, things of that nature. And we currently have 21 chapters located around the nation, and we have more to come. I think we are looking at opening up a chapter in Nigeria, a chapter over in London. So things are growing, and it's good to see this growth. All right. And oh yeah, it's free, as in free 99, as in go to foundation.blacksandtechnology.net and sign up for membership right now. So definitely do that. think it's on. I think there's a members link at the top, and just go there, sign up. We're not going to ask you for money. We're not going to come back later and say, oh, by the way, we need a couple of dollars. That's not what we're about. We want to make sure that we give people access to everything. So that's that. That's my spill on Blackstone Technology and the introduction, and we're going to jump right into Q&A with our three panelists. So I'm going to exit that. And I'm going to stop sharing. Excellent, excellent. Somebody's in the waiting room. Okay. Add them to the waiting room. If I could just get everyone who is not going a panelist to mute. Okay. We definitely appreciate that. And if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, and I'll make sure to get them the questions asked to our panelists. So we're going to jump right in. And I'm going to allow them to go through their background and introduce themselves. I know I introduced them by name, but I want them to get more into their background and all that stuff. So I'm going to start with Tameika. So Tameika, give us a little bit about your background, and I also want you to go into, and this is for each one of the panelists, just tell us how you were kind of first introduced to DevOps. So your background and how you were first introduced to DevOps.
So my background is I've been doing Linux administration for 20 years. Uh, so uh, so how did I get into DevOps? So let's back up. Um, the term DevOps is new, but automation and Linux administration is it's been around forever. It's a new word and new tools that kind of drive that as a culture. I can honestly say probably my first introduction to DevOps, not as a term, but as like I try to coin it under automation, would probably be started using tools like Ansible back in 2005. But that's then. But now in terms of you want to get technical and you want to start talking about when did DevOps actually really occur in terms of the term DevOps, we can bring forward, and I want to, I don't know, I want to say what 2010, is that about right?
You were way ahead of me. I can tell you
Yeah,
that.
is that about right? 2010
Yeah,
is
that
is
sounds
that
about right.
yeah, 2010. But again, don't get misled by the term DevOps versus what it actually is, from
Yeah,
my
and
perspective.
yeah, we're gonna get into that. So you basically got it. You were into automation way back in your Linux sysadmin days,
Yeah.
and then slowly as everyone who tries to keep up with Tameika, the industry industry started coming along, and they coined the term DevOps. Got you.
Right, right.
So let's move on to Herman. Herman, tell us a little bit about your tech background, and then kind of how you got first introduced to DevOps.
So I guess I would say I've been in DevOps since my tech career has started. I'm the youngest one in the bunch. I've only been in the tech industry for about 7 years. Um, but for me to even just get into technology, I was already so first of all, when I was deciding on what careers I wanted to be, initially I actually wanted to be in music production. But if you're in music production, a lot of the music software is very expensive. So you had to learn how to get that from somewhere. So
Wink, wink.
wink, wink. So that's where actually my experience came from actually going into uh, uh, learning like security and all that kind of stuff. Because I mean, most of the time you're on the other side of the bad actor stuff versus going in and helping like commercial wise. Um, for me, I went to go and get my degree in IT security. And during that time, actually before I even finished my degree, I had got into a company, GHG Corporation, where it was uh, a NASA subcontract company. And during that time there, I was just doing land technician, and a lot of their processes that we're doing are like, bare metal hardware. We had hardware on site, like a rack and some firewalls and all that kind of stuff. And then we had like a couple of racks at a data center. And for me, I was kind of the young, eager one in the bunch to kind of learn all the new stuff. So I had first initially attacked Docker to try to incorporate that into a lot of processes that the Java was doing, because my manager at the time, he was very old school, rack and stacking. You have to actually use all of this bare metal hardware, and he was just like learning like virtual machines and all this kind of stuff during that time. So I actually had a lot of freedom to learn under him about how things were done in the past versus and how like we can incorporate things in the future. So I think Docker was my first piece into the world of DevOps, I guess.
Right.
Because we could discuss it later on, but for DevOps for me is like it's just a concept and versus like the actual process that you implement. So I think
Yeah,
that's
we're gonna get
yeah,
into that too. That whole thing of what it means to you.
yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
I think it yeah. So overall, I think I've been in this game the whole time since I've been in technology.
Nice, nice. All right, Michael, you're up.
Yeah, indeed. Last but not least. Yeah, so I started out 20 plus years ago actually as a circuit designer. And I found that like as I learned how to develop circuits, a lot of the tools that we used were scriptable. We were working on Unix workstations, HPUX and Sun OS, and I started to learn a lot of Bash. I learned Perl, and I was using those scripting languages as tools to automate our circuit design and verification process. So fast forward another, say like 12 or 13, maybe even 14 years, and I'm landed at a job where I'm working with websites, but a lot of the concepts are still the same. Like you have to run this process on this Linux, system, and that process can be automated. So I'm using my scripting skills to, make that happen. And I mean, at that point, we're working with virtual machines, we're working with Apache, we're working with Java containers like JBoss and WebLogic, some of the, early forerunners of like, Java virtual machine software. And yeah, that's when like kind of that scripting and kind of that development and deploying stuff in an automated fashion kind of all came together. And that's where, that's when it really started to be called DevOps, because we're basically working to automate that development process to get the code into the application and available to customers as quickly and as easily and as correctly as possible. So yeah, that's kind of where I feel like my skills lie. Using my knowledge as a system administrator, because I have done Linux administration, using my skills as a sort of an automator, or what I like to call a engineering support type role, where I'm managing systems and services that other engineers use, and automating all of that stuff and kind of rolling it up in a ball, and delivering that service as a process, so that we get code and we make it available online.
And I'm gonna, that's a good segue into the next question. So I want to stick with you for this question. So what is DevOps? What does that mean to you? Because throughout at least the years that I've been quote unquote doing DevOps, right? The hardcore, I guess, people inside DevOps, they don't actually like saying doing DevOps. They don't like
Sure.
saying you're doing. So what does that term mean to you?
Well, like Herman said, DevOps is really a process. A lot of folks, when they start to say, "Oh, I want to be in DevOps or I want to work with DevOps," they'll Google it, and what they'll be presented with is a lot of tools. And they'll say, "Oh, if I want to be in DevOps, I have to use Ansible, or I have to use Chef, or I have to use Puppet, or I have to deploy 1,000 times a day." But no, that's not even really it. Really, DevOps, and I always refer to, and maybe I'll see if I can find it and share it on the screen here in a minute, that infinity symbol. And the one that I like to refer to has 8 stages in it. I'll see
Yeah.
if I can name them off the top of my head. But I mean, most of them are like, you plan, you code, you test, You deploy, or I guess you release and then you deploy. You monitor that deployment, um, and then based on that monitoring feedback, you start the cycle all over again, where you
Yeah.
continue to code, or continue to plan and continue to test. So it's like this continuous process of figuring out what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, doing it, and then testing it to make sure what you did was correct, and then putting it out there so people can use it, and then you keep an eye on it, and then based on how you keep an eye on it, you make whatever changes or modifications you need to. Now, I guess what I say is that people say, well, oh, I mean, to do DevOps, I got to use Docker and Kubernetes and Ruby on Rails, and all just like buzzword after buzzword. And I'm like, no, you can have a text file that says "Hello World" in it, and it's in a Git repository, and somebody just clicks that link to see this blank page that says "Hello World," and you can use a DevOps process to get that content delivered. It doesn't have to be anything more magical than that.
Great explanation. And I love the fact that you called out that DevOps is not tooling. It's more of the culture. It's more of the process that gets you from ideation of whatever your software is to production. Um, so I want to go to one of the other panelists, Tameika Herman. If you want to chime in and tell us kind of what it means to you all. Tamika, you seem to be unmuted first.
Yeah, so I put a link inside the chat as well too, in case anybody want to look at. Kind of it gives alludes to what Michael was saying with the different tools, right? But really, the concept was to get the development team and the operations team together instead of the development team throwing stuff over the wall to the operations team. They wanted to, and this is something you'll hear often too. You'll hear the term shift left, shift everything left, where you have the development team. Um, Now you hear the testing team, the security team. That's why you hear the term DevSecOps. But shifting everything left, so you don't have this big catastrophe in production or in your Q&A. You get that. You get those errors. You get those problems and issues taken care of up front. So for me, when I hear DevOps, I don't hear tools. I hear, hey, I have some type of application that needs to get deployed to some location. Now, what does that look like and what tool you use? It could be 20 tools. It could be five. It could be four. It could be three. It could be one, depending on your budget. You may spring for, you're just going to use GitLab and Google Cloud, or GitLab and or GitHub Actions and AWS. That may be your thing, but again, it's a process in order to get an application out to whatever environment, and that environment could be dev, QA, production, test, whatever that case may be.
And Tamika, elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by, just in case there's people here that haven't worked kind of in the kind of software delivery space.
Hmm.
What do you mean by throw it over the wall? What does that mean?
Exactly, just like that. Hey, I didn't test my code. I have no idea what that, if it's an error. It worked on my computer, so it should work on yours. It worked in my environment. It should work in your environment. Why doesn't it work? And really, like, if we start getting into a little bit more into it, that's when the whole evolution of containers came up, right? Like, hey, it doesn't have to worry about your environment because it's in a container. But you surely and slowly found out not all containers are created equal. And
Mm,
so so now, it's just one of those things. So when I say throw it over the wall, I mean literally, I made something. I'm gonna throw it over the wall, and hopefully it works, and it works in your environment, or it works in your particular space.
right.
And so that's the term, throw it over the wall, and we want to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I know we've all been in. on teams where you have your development team, and you're the operations person, whether you're Windows sysadmin or Linux sysadmin, and you designate one day or a week out of the month to deploy the code. And we've been in the situations where that deployment can take hours. And then as soon as it gets into production, everything kind of blows up, and you're there for a few more hours because the code wasn't tested, in the right fashion, or there was something, maybe a database schema didn't get updated or something like that. Like, there's all types of scenarios in which you try to deploy code into production, and things just go awry, and you find yourself for your entire weekend kind of lost because of that. Herman, did you want to jump in and add on to?
Yeah, yeah. So just to put a little different spin on it. Well, what DevOps means to me is just supporting the software development lifecycle, or through automation, and just increasing the time it takes to get to a stage or an environment that you need to.
So,
Especially,
real quick, not to cut you off, but tell us what you mean by, and the reason why I'm kind of interjecting here is because I want people who are new to this whole process to kind of understand a little bit more some of the terminology that we use, such as get it to staging, or get it to, like, what does that actually mean?
so I mean, with I guess depending on whatever software development lifecycle, usually a standard software development lifecycle, you have different environments where different versions of the software may live. So, for instance, like a simple one is just testing, staging, where you might have testing is like where you will have your initial unit tests, or possibly maybe some small integration tests. And then moving to staging is a environment where you're getting it as close to production as possible. Usually should be an identical situation as being in production. You want to have all your heavy integrations tests. You want to have all your uh, possibly setups for blue-green deployments into prod. Blue-green deployments meaning that you're spinning some servers down to bring up the new versions of other servers. And then prod, of course, is the customer-facing. I guess if you're doing web development, customer-facing, or if you're just doing basically software, like executables or something like that, making sure that you have that software like signed, working correctly, put it in the right place for where customers can pull.
Right.
Um, so to kind of elaborate on the DevOps and teams part of it. So my time at Amazon, as an Amazon engineer, there is no separation between the DevOps team and the software team. It's 5, 6 guys on the team, and everybody's responsible for the pipelines and integrations and all that kind of stuff. So for me, that's why I say supporting the software development lifecycle, because uh, even like none of these tools exist. Terraform, Ansible, all this doesn't exist. It's just concepts, because all this stuff is homegrown, or you're sometimes building the process yourself. So I think that's why I say DevOps is just a concept or a principle, because you still want to, even if it's a different tool, whatever tool is being used, it's still going to be, you want to have efficient pipeline systems, or workflows. Workflows, you want to have secure environments where everything's supposed to land correctly, and you want to make sure that's all streamlined and working properly, because you if you're working at a rapid pace, you can't go back and constantly fix one issue in a certain environment or staging. So you want to kind of make them as identical as possible.
Right. And I love that. I like talking about, like the process, the workflow, the tooling, and I like how we associate that with DevOps, as opposed to the tooling. Because one thing that I always say is that if you can kind of equate um, processes and things like that, just think of it in terms of farming, right, or farmer. A farmer throughout the years, I mean, they pretty much do the same thing throughout the history of time, right? Like they get up at a specific time during the day and they go out and they may plow, they may plant seeds, and then they may harvest those, the whatever grows, or if there's corn or whatever. Like they go through the same process over and over again. Now, over time, that's their process. Really hasn't changed a whole lot except for the tooling that they have in place. And now they're more efficient. Now they can do things quicker. Now they can do things in bulk. And so I like to kind of equate it to that, because that's kind of what we see in software. One thing that I when I was working at this data center is we made the mistake of purchasing this project management tool. Spent a lot of money on it and everything like that, but it never actually helped us. Right? It never helped us get anywhere because our process was broken, and all the tool did was really kind of expose that even more, as opposed to actually helping us through the process. And so I like that you all touched on, hey, it's not the tools, it's more of the process, it's the culture, it's the workflows. Like if you don't have that stuff right, then it doesn't matter what tool you bring out. It's still not going to be as efficient as it could be.
And I want to add to all of this because another one of us brought it up is if your
Hmm.
documentation is not right.
Yes.
If you're not documenting what you're doing, I don't care if it's a thought or whatever. Like, hey, I'm gonna come back to this because I got stuck at X, Y, and Z. Commit it, right? Just commit it, just so that somebody can pick it up or somebody can look at it, or you know where you left off or what have you. Your documentation is your lifeline, pretty much, right? It gets you out of a lot of sticky situations. It allows others to see what you're doing. So in all of this process is the documentation, and if you can automate your documentation, even better, because now you got your change logs, you got your readmes, you got your make docs or whatever, but you can automate your documentation, because now if I leave this job, someone can come behind me and look and see what was done, what kind of commits were made, what was the train of thought in order to arrive to this solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You,
Go ahead.
the worst thing to get stuck with is a whole bunch of tribal knowledge. Because once those people leave, I mean, you have to go back and figure out how the system works, and you just wasted time. If anything, the most important tool of all is the change management tool, whatever that is being used, whether it's just git commits, shoot, writing it on a piece of paper and submitting it somewhere. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I want to double down on the whole documentation thing. I know, no matter where, I mean, because that's a good place to where you can start. Like even if you're not a hardcore coder or anything, you can at least get to the point to where you can commit documentation. And I've seen people on teams where their lie in documentation, and they're not the greatest coders or anything like that. They may not be the smartest on the team or anything like that, but they're so valuable because they do great documentation. No matter what problem they work on, they document it to a T. So if you're looking to even start somewhere, even some of the open source projects that are out there nowadays, a lot of them look for, and I think we did a podcast on this. I think with Tony Sebro, and so go check that out. Shameless plug, blackstonetechnology.net. Look at the podcast, and he talks about just getting into open source, and you don't have to be a hardcore coder in order to be in an open source community. You can just write documentation because a lot of it is lacking anyhow. And I think that goes the same for being in DevOps, because documentation is part of that process.
And can I offer a testimony to that,
Yeah,
Greg?
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I joined a team, actually the team that I'm on right now, and I mean, our documentation was good, but it was, I don't want to say it was good. It was decent, but it was out of date. So
Mm,
we were really revamping a lot of the processes, updating the documentation, and I had the benefit of working with a young lady, and she was sharp, but she wanted to learn more about DevOps. She had sort of the basic skills, how to get around the terminal and everything. So she shadowed me as I was working on bringing this environment kind of up to date. And the
mhm.
best thing that came out of that sort of pair programming sort of thing is that she documented everything that I was doing. She was like, "Oh, okay, that's how we're gonna do it," and she wrote up the docs and like put it in. We were using Confluence and put it in Confluence. And
Mm,
like by the time I was done doing, because she didn't write any code, but by the time that I was doing what I was supposed to do, I was like, man, I don't want to document this stuff. But she had already documented everything. And
yeah.
so that was like, it just, like the most beautiful collaboration that I think I ever had the opportunity to work in, because it was like you're saying, it's like both poles of that tent were in place. We had the code and the process was in place. We had everything documented and it was current and up to date. So yeah, please document.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to start with Tamika with this next question because I know you come from the Linux sysadmin, sysengineer side of it. Um, how did you move from because with although DevOps is involves processes and things of that nature. Um, how did you move from being this hardcore kind of sys engineer to having more of a coding mentality? And what did that process look like for you?
Money.
Was that what did you say?
Money, money.
Oh.
No, but so I can give you my mad rant is always looking ahead to see like what the industry is doing and where industry is going, and that you don't actually have to attend conferences. You can, a lot of conferences on YouTube, but the reason why I say that is because the more value you can bring to a company, the more value you are for a company, and then the more value you are for yourself when it's time for you to move, if you move, and the more trajectory, the longevity you give yourself in the industry. So for me, I'm always looking to see like not what the latest tool is or not what the latest concept is, just where's the industry going? Is the industry focused on automating sensors, or is the industry focused on in the fintech world? How quick can I get these numbers crunched and calculated? What does that look like for me? Is that something I'm interested in? So my the way I kind of, it's not even kind of, just the way I stumbled upon it was entering one job, and we were actually making so containers have been around for a while. If you started in the Unix era, containers were called, pretty much called jails inside of that world, and so they've been around for a while. So we were moving, and this is with the U.S. courts actually. So all your federal all your federal courts and so forth were all Linux based, sitting what we call in jails. And the goal was to actually, and this is back in the day, migrate that from this jail system, because what ends up happening is on a jail system is I can't upgrade the operating system in terms of, if I upgrade this library, it's going to affect everybody. So that's how containers were back in the day. So we had to move from those containers to that jail system to VMware. Now the question is, how do you move the largest federal court, which is I think is California. I think it's Northern California is the largest. But between California and New York are the two largest federal courts in the nation. So you're talking a lot of data. And how do you migrate them and keep them up and running at the locations, and keep their failovers up and running as well too? So you're not gonna sit there and just do a rsync of this data. You're not gonna do that. So enter using tools and understanding how to automate was a thing. And so that the whole process with understanding how to do automation and how do you how do you do testing, and including in that, once you make that move, was a part of that. So that's how I got into the whole concept of DevOps and automating, and documentation was super huge, and then making sure that process is seamless. Once you do it one way, you come back and you may iterate over that, but you have a process that you can fine tune, and you can replicate that across multiple boundaries.
Excellent, excellent. Michael, do you want to take a shot at that question? How did you how did you move? Because you say you were designing circuits and everything like that, and
Yeah.
so how did
Yeah.
that whole your whole coding mentality come to be?
Yeah, it was, I mean, kind of interesting, I guess, because yeah, I went to school BSMS as a computer engineer, so I was totally learning how to work on the hardware side. Like my whole like entry from since I was a kid was to develop the hardware that powered video game systems. So I grew up playing Atari 2600. I broke transistor radios to look at the stuff that was inside them, pulled electronics open, and I'm like, man, this is what I want to do. So I went to school to learn how to make those circuits, and I mean, I guess it was a benefit to me that at the time that I was coming through school, I'm not going to say when that was, but a lot of that was being digitized. So we were using software where we were actually laying out the circuits again on these Sun OS computers, HPUX computers, and that was a kind of a manual process, but they were also codifying that process. So you're actually using hardware description languages to describe the circuits that you were designing. So when I was actually developing the circuits, I was coding. I was saying, this circuit register or this register of transistors is going to look like this, or this adder is going to look like this. Um, and that's kind of how I got into coding that way. I mean, I had to pick up C and some other languages along the way. I mean, I could go far back as Pascal, but again, really, it was the hardcore when I got into the industry of using Perl, Bash. I don't know if y'all remember Tickle Shell, but like those were the languages that I really kind of came up to speed on. And then along the way, I mean, those languages carried me. I picked up Python along the way. Um, but I will say that my coding isn't necessarily application development. It's still geared towards automating the process. I mean, on the DevOps team that I'm on, I'm a true ops in that DevOps equation because I don't care what the code is. Again, I could go back to Hello World and I say, if you give me a Hello World app, your Hello World app is going to be the most efficiently deployed, most 99.999% highly available, Hello World application that you probably ever seen. So yeah, I'm really into making sure everything's automated and just easy. I mean, I like to see computers doing stuff. I like to be able to type just a couple of couple short commands, and the computer goes off and does a whole bunch of things. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I like to see my screen scrolling. So that's kind of what fuels me to do the automation part of it, particularly at the command line.
Right.
And sort of along that process, like I went from circuit design, I went to like application engineering where I'm supporting other engineers, and then from there going to supporting these VMs and some bare metal systems that are serving high traffic websites. And we definitely needed a lot of automation in that space. And that's where the whole DevOps thing kind of came into play. So yeah, it's been a pretty easy progression for me. I won't say easy because I had to learn a lot of stuff along the way, but a sort of a natural progression where my skills just kind of dovetailed into the next thing, the next opportunity for me along the way.
Excellent, excellent. Herman, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I guess my introduction to coding has been a combination of pure laziness and interest in just doing projects. If something takes, if I'm doing something repetitive too many times, then I go ahead and try to find a way to automate it. I remember one of the first projects I did, like as at a company, was to um, create an automated email billing sheet Basically, we were using Google Enterprise or whatever, Google G Suite at the time, and they had just changed their billing cycles to do like per second the email was up, and at first it was like on a hourly basis or something like that, so it was easy to calculate. But then it moved to that per second cycle, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna be able to calculate this if somebody leaves in the middle of the day or leave in the middle of the month or something like that. So I actually used Excel and used VBA, Visual Basic, and that was my first coding project. And then also I was just interested in trying to build things that I was just interested in. Like I wanted to create a SoundCloud, but it would basically be with an automated music player for users that signed up. Um, and their music would be like containerized in their own little world. So with that, I was using Docker along with the Rancher orchestrator to use their APIs to try to code up something like that. So I've just always been interested in dabbling and doing things, and that's just translated over to my career along the way.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on something that you mentioned, the term lazy. So it's something that comes up quite a bit when you talk to, hardcore developers and people in DevOps, and it's primarily this mindset of, if I have to do it, more than a few times, I want to automate that, because I don't want to do this manually, or what have you. And so they say the best programmers are the laziest people, right? So I just kind of want to add on to that, because I came strictly from a data center environment. Um, and everything was pretty much done manually. I did not have a coding mentality at all. Like, I didn't have that mentality starting off in my career, that if I'm doing something more than once, or I shouldn't say more than once, but more than a few times, maybe I need to look into a way to try to automate that. My mentality was, if I did it over and over and over again, I was just doing work, right? But when you get into DevOps, it's like, hey, you need to be able to automate these things so that it can free you up to do things that really matter. And I say that because Jason put a very, very interesting question into the chat. Um, and I think this kind of segues, or fits well into that whole thing. His question or questions are, where's ops? Um, is it the persons in the data center keeping the cables organized, or does DevOps cross into the business operations, sales, billing, SEO? How well do each of you feel you understand the business you DevOps for? And I think that's important.
Yeah.
And I'll let someone answer that. I'll go ahead, Michael. I'll let you.
Yeah, I would love to answer that question,
Yeah.
because I think everyone who's involved in what, if we want to call it a DevOps process, bottom line, you need to know how your company makes money. Because if you don't know that, then you really don't understand your role in the process. Because like, say for instance, oh man, I gotta patch these servers. It's okay, I'll patch them whenever. Or, oh, I gotta reboot this, or I gotta deploy this, whatever. Yeah, you need to understand how important that is into the scope of your company making money. And yes, that goes all the way back up to I guess I'll call them customers, and I have to describe these different type of customers. So for me, as a DevOps on a DevOps team, my customers are the developers. Now, the developers, they get their sort of inputs from somebody else in the business. Somebody if particularly for the stuff that I work on, somebody in HR, somebody in admissions, because we have parks, and parks have tickets. So those people are also part of the process. They are the developers' customers. So those people in the business, they have customers that they need to serve. Either they are guests that are coming to our park, or they are other employees that are working with the system. So it's a chain, right? It's like those guests and the customers, the guests, employees, have a demand on the business, who are customers of the developers, who are my customers to deliver this service or this system or whatever the case is. So if I didn't understand that sort of long tail, that chain of how, my company sort of derives income, to pay me, then, what am I doing here? I'm just kind of twiddling bits and, moving my mouse or whatever the case is. So yeah, you definitely need to know your role in all the cogs that make your business run if you're trying to get into DevOps. The other thing, and I'll kind of leave it at this because I could probably go on for a minute, is that uh, you need to understand like the value that you provide, because I mean, you are providing a service, and based on that service, your company's going to make money. Um, and your developers, the same thing. They're providing a service, they're developing the content, where the case is. Maybe if you're a full stack engineer, you're doing both. You are doing the development and you're doing the deployment and you're monitoring and so on and so forth. So yeah, you definitely have to understand that entire flow from where somebody lays down $1 and it comes into your company, and sort of flows through whatever service or application you're providing and somehow kind of ends up in your bank account. That's just really important to understand that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Uh,
Go ahead,
so
Tameika.
so I'm gonna give. I don't know. I don't want to say a rebuttal, but I'm gonna give a different vision. So yes, understand how the money flows, but also understand the company size. Because if you're walking in and you have 5 people in a company, you are ops, you are security, you're everything. So you need to understand the company size. That's one. The other one is understanding how the company plans on growing, because that's going to change your vision, one, of the company, two, probably your position, and three, probably the amount of money coming in could possibly change as well too, as in terms of the growth of the company. And the other one is the business aspect of it, right? And that business aspect is, maybe the company isn't doing anything that you would like for them to do right now, but you see a way to bring and generate that revenue. And you have to, and it's basically falls under business development. But again, you looking at that, you have to say to yourself, well, if I bring this to the company, how can we grow it and set that out going forward? So again, can you be on the ops side? Yes. Can you be on the development side? Yes, you can be on both sides. You can be a number of things, but again, I think it's also company dependent when you're looking at that.
Yeah, I'll agree with that as well. It is very company dependent. Like, because as of right now, I'm working at a startup, and you wear many hats in a startup, and especially with security. I mean, you are the security person because you're actually managing all the hardware, all the infrastructure and instances and stuff for everybody in the company, and then you have to be in tune with the finance side and the sales teams, because you're the one that's assigning tags to instances and processes so they can actually do the billing process. And then you have to actually talk to them about what do you want for your billing process. And usually they don't know because they don't know how the system works. So you have to explain to them how the billing system works and then work with them on how to make a accurate and streamlined billing process for them. Um, and a lot of that takes you actually developing some kind of standard for the engineering teams and the billing teams to get that accurate representation across each team of how much they're spending and stuff like that. Business operation side, of course, I mean, if anything goes down, you're the one that's getting called. So you have to be responsive in all aspects of, or at least knowledgeable in all aspects of what's going on and why is this down and how do you react to it. Especially in security, you got to know which buckets are not supposed to be, or in terms of AWS, S3, which buckets are not open or which buckets are accessible from outside and all that kind of stuff, because a lot of that actually falls upon you as the, I guess, DevOps engineer in this. So you have to be in tune with every team, and that means you're the one mostly attending the meetings with the sales teams and the billings teams and all these other meetings. I don't know about everybody else, but I have a lot of meetings, so you have to be able to represent what's going on for the company wide, at least on the technology side, to translate that into business for them.
So,
Eh, eh,
And
go ahead,
yeah,
Michael.
I was just gonna say, can I piggyback on
Yeah, yeah.
Herman's statement? And I think if we go back to like that DevOps cycle, I say the entry point is that plan stage. You
Mhm.
can't just come out here and say, "Hey, I'm a DevOps person. Hey, I'm gonna plan." Well, what are you gonna plan if you don't get any input from anybody? So you need your developers, you need people from the business side to give you, like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. Let's figure out how we're gonna do it. Now, with that said, that's where your expertise as a person with systems, with programming, with cloud, with all the applications, with the services, that's where you bring the value, because they're going to come in and say, we need a Kubernetes cluster that can support all the traffic that Google supports, and they're delivering hello world. So you need to say, well, hold up, we could probably do that with a static website that's hosted on GitHub for free. So that's basically where your expertise comes in, and next thing you know, you're saving your company millions of dollars, because you just steered them away from making a very expensive mistake. So yeah, all of that comes back to the plan and the collaboration part of being on a DevOps team.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out. That's actually what I was going to mention, Michael, is that, when people get into into this into DevOps, for instance, right? Some come in and they think that it's all just, let's get down to the nitty gritty, and I'm an engineer and stand up the, but it's very, very important to understand what the process is, right? So go and talk to the salespeople, talk to your project managers, talk to the product managers if you can, even down to the level of speaking to customer support, because they're in the trenches every single day with issues and things like that, and they are on the front lines and they know the problems before you might know what the problems are, right? Like, they know what people what so for instance, if there's a feature that rolled out and people don't know how to use it, or it's not intuitive enough, or it's not working the right way, those frontline people are going to be the first ones that know whether or not that tool or that feature even works. And if you can sit with them, um, and even just listen in on calls, or just even have a conversation with them, you'll get to know a lot about the business more so than if you just stayed on the engineering side and just did the automation part. So I think that that collaboration, that communication part is key. So I want to get into, because we're running up on an hour. I know I had this down for an hour and a half, so I want to really get into um, more about like the tools, the skills, and the resources and things like that. Like, how you ended up, what tools did you learn? What skills did you have to learn? What resources did you have to read? I'll stick with you right now, Michael. Just kind of tell us, go through those things, and name the tools, name some of the things that you think will help people, you know, really increase their skill set and increase their knowledge, and have a better chance as they get into DevOps, right?
Sure. Well, I hope Tameika doesn't mind me stealing her thunder a little bit, but you got to start with Linux. You got to know. I'm not saying you have to be a Red Hat certified engineer, but you need to know how to get around in a Linux system at the command line. I think that would be number one. Now, with that said, a programming language, I'm not going to be real specific, but any programming language that gives you the sort of the mentality to say, these are my inputs, this is the desired output. How can I, codify a solution that gives me, that desired state? Um, Now, with that said, and I guess I said I wasn't going to say anything, but I would start with Bash, to be honest, because if you know Linux, more than likely you're going to have to touch Bash somewhere in there. And looking at a lot of the things that you automate today, even today, I mean, I don't know how old Bash is, but Bash is like where the rubber meets the road. You know, you can get a lot of stuff done with it. Now, if you want to get like higher level programming languages, you know, Python, Ruby is another good one. Go is kind of like the new kid on the block, and everybody wants to do everything in Go. Um, but I just say pick one, start somewhere, even Java, C sharp, you know, just pick something, start with it and learn the ins and outs of a programming language and how to think, how to solve a problem logically. And I mean, I could go on, but I don't want to steal anything from anybody else if y'all want to jump in with a skill or a tool or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I'll, I'm always say Linux, just for first and foremost, and the reason why I say that, and this comes from experience. So even on my current team that I'm on, my manager, when we're sitting in phone calls with like different people, stumbles with Linux, and he admits it. He stumbles, and we have several people on our team that stumble. And we're talking people that have been around, 15, 18 years, and and I see it not just on my team. I've seen it on multiple teams. And if you're deploying Kubernetes, it's Ubuntu, it's Linux. Even Microsoft is now talking about going full blown Linux. They have the WSL. So it's just it's at the cornerstone. Back in the day, the joke used to be Microsoft ran their web servers on Linux machines. That was the ongoing joke,
Yep.
right? They used to have Apache machines. That was the ongoing joke. And I interviewed with Microsoft, and they were running Linux. They had a whole open source group, and this was back in 2004, 2005. They were using Linux then, they're using it now. It's not, it hasn't changed. If you're talking about tools, I second Bash, but I also second Python. And what I see a lot of people in a lot of different startups, they're pulling in Rust into the startup. So if that's something, if you want to be on the cutting edge, especially when you start getting into machine learning and modeling and AI ops and natural language processing at these startups and so forth. In particular, fintech companies as well too. When we start looking at that, but another big tool, and I think everybody across the board here uses Terraform and most of the Hashi products. You can't lose with those right now. If you're just, I mean, even if you just said, you know what, I'm just gonna learn containers and Terraform and Linux. I don't see how you wouldn't be employed. You would learn some other concepts on the job, but I don't see how you would not be employed. That's just my personal thought process there. And finally, and last but not least, out of all of this, I still go back to documentation, but understand security, right? Just pick up a book and understand uh, what does it mean to secure a container? What does it mean to write test driven deployment? What does it mean to write secure code? What does that look like? Understand your security architecture at any company you go into. Understand that. And the last but not least, which goes back to something we were discussing earlier, Michael, you were saying, and Greg, you were saying, talk to teams. What you're saying is, um, what you're actually saying in ThoughtWorks, and I was looking this up trying to find it. ThoughtWorks has a very good example of this. Basically, you're talking about having cross-functional teams where you're able to sit on one team and then on your team and then go sit on another team and look at how they do their sprints. But what you're doing is now you're understanding how that team works, and you're also putting yourself out there to learn something new, and you're also driving. You become that driving it factor for your team. You're like, hey, this team over here is doing this. This looks like it could be something we can do. Let's incorporate that. In fact, let's have our two teams have their sprint together where we're now talking to each other and we're pushing the product forward. But those are the things that I think are super important when you're just starting out. now versus learning it later?
I
Herman?
yeah, I'm gonna throw a little wrench in this because I mean, as the people that have 20 plus years of experience, of y'all been um, the on the rise of seeing stuff, new things implemented, and a lot of the stuff back then was you had to learn Linux inside and out for it to work because you were working on the system, and a lot of times you're working in var logs to get logs. You're working in the initds to get systems running. All kind of. You still probably remember your signals and stuff like that. I can't remember them all. I don't know, but I guess as a young person starting out, there is a whole bunch of stuff going on right now. There's containers, there's machine learning, there's cloud this, blah blah that, Terraform, Chef, Puppet, what these crazy names for systems that kind of just streamline processes that um, earlier engineers had to deal with. So I feel like you miss out on a lot of the concepts. So for me, my biggest thing, I mean, before you even like pick a tool or pick something, do a project. So say, hey, I want to build a website from scratch, like meaning that I want to work with the actual instance. I want to program the firewall. I want to get in there with the network. I want to get it from scratch, from zero to working. And from there, yes, that's a big ask, but just figure out what layers and what processes are needed to actually, build a simple website. You know, because you learn a lot. I mean, you learn HTML, you learn even if you want to like do something fancy with Java, you will learn sort of object oriented program with that. Then you actually touch shells, bash shells, and all that kind of stuff to run the process and figuring out which different ways you can actually run the process. And then you can like move on to like putting it in a container and seeing how you're just kind of in terms of like I guess planting a flower. You put the flower in the ground and say you want to transfer it to a pot. You're just taking some of those same systems and rooting them into a flower pot or a container. And you'll see that the container system and the actual system that you're running on isn't really too much different. You'll just have some low level Docker program that you have to do, but that's just involved with the learning. But for me, I think that's how I learned the best. I said I wanted to do this. Let me go figure out how to do it. And I think if you start jumping off, especially like say Terraform, I didn't start using Terraform until 8 months ago for this job I'm working in now. I was like, I don't get Terraform. I don't understand what's this use case. I get it now. I'm a I'm a Terraform evangelist, but if you start jumping off on these tools, Chef, Puppet, Terraform, Ansible to an extent, you miss out on a lot of learning and concepts that you could have gotten from just like building a simple website or building a simple, I don't know, calculator program or something like that. So make sure you just actually do projects and see why it's like this instead of like this is the tool to use.
I do
Yeah.
And
have
I
one.
was,
I got one
Go ahead.
question for you, Herman.
Mm.
Mhm.
What operating system did you use to build your first website?
Uh,
Windows 7.
no, no. I mean, actually, no. I think I messed with the I forget what that file's called. I just did it on Windows, but then
Okay.
I moved to
So
Linux.
I asked maybe.
Yeah.
Mm.
But what I was going to add, and that's why I just kind of left it open. I wanted to see, if anybody else was going to touch on it. But I think Tameika, you kind of said it like as you're learning all these things, and even Herman, as people are working with Docker, whatever. I think the cloud is another, and I'm using that term generally, but cloud is another sort of skill that you need to pick up.
Yeah.
Um, because if you are learning Linux, more than likely you're going to be working with virtual machines, whether it's locally or more than likely in a cloud, which means it's just running on a computer system somewhere else that's not local to where you are, and you have to connect to it. So, I mean, the major cloud providers, AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure, pick one and learn it, because really what's going to happen is the concepts that you pick up with that particular cloud are going to be easily transferable to another cloud provider. I mean, I would say maybe start with AWS because that's the most popular. They have the biggest market share of, as a cloud service provider. But if you start with Google, I mean, their interfaces are a whole lot prettier. Some of their command line stuff is a little bit easier. Azure is kind of like that cousin, that kind of does things a little bit differently. Still, the concepts are the same. So depending on where you start with it, just pick up a cloud provider, learn how to learn how the networking works, learn how the VMs work, learn about load balancing, and maybe even get into some serverless concepts. But again, just start somewhere with some cloud stuff as well.
Oh, I love this discussion because it's everyone is at different stages within their career, and so everyone has a different perspective on what you need to pursue and how you need to pursue it and things like that. I love Herman's take on this because I'm based on what he just said, I'm pretty similar to Herman. It's like if I don't know the underlying basics of it, yeah, I could probably do it, but then I won't understand. It's almost kind of like what do they call it? Like Common Core stuff now, right? Where they're teaching the kids, oh yeah, you can get it, you can get this result or this solution like this, but here's the underlying way that it actually works. This is how you actually get to that. It's not just adding one to it. And so I'm the same way. I'm a person that, and sometimes to my detriment, right? Like sometimes it's because I'm like that. Like I have to go back and read additional material and thing. It might take me a little bit longer to get something and things like that, but in the end I end up knowing a little bit more than the average person or the average engineer or something like that because I dug underneath the hood a little bit more. But I also think it's important that you have those basics, because if you don't have a strong base and a strong foundation, like you're not going to really have a strong structure above that, right? Like, so to me, and the way this kind of reads out just from listening to you all, it sounds like DevOps engineering is the new security, right? Because there's security, and I don't mean this like apples to apples. I mean this from a standpoint of everything that's encompassed in knowing about how to let's say be a quote unquote true DevOps person. There's so much into it now, as opposed to back in the days of just being a system engineer. You had a lot of these compartmentalized groups, right? You had your security, you had your networking, you had your Linux guys, you had your Windows guys, you had your storage guys, you had your and so now and security was like that. So security was like, oh, you gotta know Linux, you gotta know networking, you have to know programming, you have to, and that's what DevOps is kind of becoming now. Now you need to know Linux, you need to learn know at least some of the tenets of programming, right? You got to learn cloud now. You have to learn some security stuff, config management, infrastructure as code. You got to end up learning CI/CD. You got to learn networking. You have to know about some storage. You have to know about DNS and all this stuff. So there's a ton of stuff involved in just DevOps and so I think that everyone added their 2 cents and provided a lot of perspective on some of the things that you need to know. What are some resources out there where you would say, Michael, this is where you should start? Books, websites, training sites?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm going to be a little bit self-serving here, but I develop content for LinkedIn Learning, and they've got a lot of good content there. They actually have a DevOps catalog, which covers a lot of different tools, a lot of different DevOps processes and concepts and so on. So if you can get access to LinkedIn Learning, there's a lot of good stuff there. A lot of people don't know it, but a lot of libraries provide free access for their card holders to access LinkedIn Learning as a part of their library membership. So go
Wow.
to your library, see if they provide sort of e-learning or ebook access, and if they do, ask them if they provide access to LinkedIn Learning, ask them if they provide access to Pluralsight, ask them if they provide access to Cloudera. Those are like not Cloudera, but Coursera. I'm sorry.
Mm.
Those are three sites that I would look at, and I mean also a Cloud Guru. It's another good site if you want to get certified in cloud, and also Linux Academy. But I guess Linux Academy is part of a Cloud Guru now. But
Yeah, yeah, it
those are
is.
some of the sites and resources that I use. And actually, I'm looking for. I'll see if I can find it. The book that kind of like that I grew up on. It was like a Bible to me because it's on my desk. You know, for many of the first years of my career was Unix in a nutshell, and that taught me everything I needed to know about the Unix command line, VI as an editor, Make as a sort of a automation orchestrator. Yeah, so if there's any one book that I would turn to, it would be Unix in a nutshell.
Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah. So to piggyback off of what you were saying earlier, and finish this off when I go into it. But the reason why I always stick to Linux is because there is all the things that you're talking about are concepts, right? And so Linux touches on every concept that you're talking about: the containers, the website, the automation tools, the understanding storage, the understanding of networking, the security. It's all baked into it. So it's no way you can really get around it. As far as what books do you need or what websites that you should use, I think Herman posted one. The other one is that I always tend to try to run to is is it Free Code Camp? It's another
Mhm.
one out there that has a actual breakdown of a mind map of what that looks like in terms
Uh,
of what DevOps looks like. And
roadmaps.sh.
nah, it's another one
Oh
before
yes.
them. It's another one before them. They
Mm.
turned over to a roadmap, but there's another one before them, where they actually talk about what does it look like to be a DevSecOps, a DevOps, and then also a cloud administrator. So they talked about the different tools surrounding that. I'm gonna look it up here in a minute, but they talk about the different tools that surround that are popular that surround it. And the other one that I've been following recently is the CNCF has a what they call a
What
role.
is CNCF? Just for those who don't know.
I always refer to them as the Linux Foundation, but is it the Cloud Native Computing Foundation? Is that
Yeah,
is that
Yeah,
what the
something
C?
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
cloud native.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I follow them for, and I'm gonna post this link. They have what they called a landscape of just different tools, different people that are coming in as far as open source. But the reason why I like this is for no a couple of reasons. One, you get to see what open source projects are out there, and if you want to contribute to those open source projects, um, that's another good way to get in. Not in terms of just to DevSecOps or DevOps, but that's another way to get into a company when you're contributing to those projects. The other one is you get to see what's actually coming out, and you get to work with something from the ground up. It's nothing like working with something from the ground up where you're able to make the flaws, where the culture is not really set. You're there and you can help drive the culture, and that really is company dependent on size. But I like to look across, what people are doing. A lot of these companies have meetups. They also have their set of tools and that they're using. So it's nothing for you to hop in and do some documentation with one of those meetups and say, okay, well, I'm going to learn Git. I'm going to learn how to read the documentation. And this is a downfall of most people is they never read the documentation. They never read the how to. And a lot of documentation have errors. And so that's one way to commit to a particular uh, group, but also it's another way for you to learn, right? You learn through the documentation by reading. So that's goes back to that. But I also want to shout out O'Reilly. I like their setup. They're expensive, but they have all the conferences, all the O'Reilly conferences and stuff like that. They're in that platform, and they always do virtual training. They always have something every single day where you can go learn something. So those are my takeaways that I wanted to share with everyone.
Herman, you want to add your spill on it?
Yeah. So I mean, I posted one, the roadmap.sh DevOps. So on there, it gives you pretty much a roadmap of what it means to be in DevOps. But it's a really good start to actually hit the concepts that you may come to over your time learning to be just a developer in any type of techie, and you'll run across a lot of these skills. So although they don't like explain it, that gives you at least some kind of template of where you can go and say, hey, okay, what is Go? Hey, what is using a screen? Or what is sockets or something like that? And
Right.
from there, you can actually go and pop off and do the research yourself. Another one, I mean, is the Linux Foundation. The Linux Foundation has a wealth of knowledge, and if you actually get access, you will have access to all the classes and whatnot to there. I mean, other than that, be very good at Googling, watch YouTube videos. Like, man, I wish I had the website, but it was a website on how to Google food to find what you're looking for. I'm gonna try to find that again, but it it helps to know what you're looking for.
Right. No, I think that's people tend to not mention something like YouTube, right? Like because it's everyone uses it for various reasons, but YouTube can be a very very good platform for learning things. I also want to throw in there too podcast.
Yeah.
I have like over a dozen different podcasts queued up on. I use Google's podcast platform, but like Arrested DevOps. Let me look. Cloudcast is one that I utilize. Um, Command Line Heroes, and sometimes some of these are just they're not all of them are um, uh, about knowledge transfer. Some of it is just about the stories and things like that you hear. Like Command Line Heroes, it's more about kind of the historic aspects of technology. Kubernetes Podcast, Software Defined Talk. Scott Hanselman has one called Hansel Minutes. He talks about a huge variety of different things. DevOps Radio, it's really cool. Code Newbie is a good one. DevOps and Docker, um, Azure DevOps, that's a good one. Software Defined Talks, interviews, Linux Action News. There's a ton of them. Just look up DevOps on any of your podcast platforms, and you'll find some pretty good ones out there. I do want to, before we get out of here, I got a couple more questions. Just so people can kind of get a little bit more understanding. It's hey, I got the some of the skills now. I have some of the knowledge. I'm really ready to go. And at this DevOps thing, where do I start? Like, where do I start within my company? Like, what do you DevOps first? Right? How do you get buy-in from management? How do you get buy-in from teammates? So Herman, since you we left off last with you, can what do you do first? Right? How do you get this buy-in from management? How do you get buy-in from your teammates, your coworkers?
So I mean, it depends on your company. I know some companies, depending on what position you're in, if you're in something that has like kind of a strict tier of, hey, this is kind of your job and do your job, um, those areas I would try to figure out how to like automate areas in my job to improve the processes of my team. Um, it's different from if you are like in a smaller company where you actually wear many hats or have someone willing to give you the freedom to mess around pretty much. In that case, then you would want to present, certain ideas. Like, even like I said earlier, figure out how to improve your management process. A lot of companies still struggle with that, and you don't have to do any code. It's just how do you get better documentation and better change processes, meaning like, okay, you change a server and you change configurations on the server. How do you save the old configuration and the new configuration? How do you able to do like a rollback if you needed to change something in an emergency? So if you had more freedom to actually mess with those configurations, I would say start there as well.
Michael, you want to jump in? What do you?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And I'm going to echo a lot of what Herman said as well. I started automating my job basically. Um, so I would look at the things that, like we talked about earlier. If I was doing it once at the command line, I needed an alias. If it was a process, then I would put it in a make file or something like that. And I mean, again, like Tameika was saying, reading the documentation, that's really how I got ahead on my teammates, or they thought I was a super genius, because I would read the documentation cover to cover, you know, and they'd be like, "Oh, wow, how'd you do that? I didn't know that tool could do that." Well, it's right there in the documentation. If you had taken a look to see, then maybe you could have figured it out. But I would say to get started, no matter where you are, no matter where your company is in the DevOps process, you're going to look for two things. You're going to look for the pain, number one, and then you're going to look for cost optimization. I bet you there's somebody on your team, there's somebody in your company, maybe your customers, they're having some friction or some sort of bad experience using your product or following a process or whatever, and that's what I'm calling the pain. If you can remove that pain, then you're providing value. So if your deployments take 3 hours and they're error prone, automate that process. At least start by documenting the process and then automate it so that you can just click a button. It's automated, it's tested, it's deployed, and now that 3 hour deployment is now like 15 minutes. That's saving some pain. And then cost optimization. If you're able to save money, then you're definitely showing value, because again, I mean, we're all kind of, we're working hopefully to provide, some benefit or get some financial benefit to at least provide for our families, whatever it is. And companies are in business to make money. So if you're saving money, increasing the bottom line, then that's definitely another way. And when I say, I mean, it's kind of nebulous to say save money, but look for those ways to reduce costs. If again, if somebody spins up this Kafka cluster, this Redshift cluster to ingest one message a month, and they're spending tens of thousands of dollars on this cluster, then I mean that's something that you could spin down, find some other way to do that. Last thing I wanted to add was uh, if you are at a company where your DevOps process is just getting started, it's not well defined, take advantage of lax change procedures. It's like, I'm in an enterprise, I can't do much of anything without somebody signing off on it. We have DevOps processes, we automate things, but if you're at a place where you can, like, you know what, I could probably change this and nobody's even going to know if this service stays up and running, everything's going to be fine. But at the end of the day, you're saving money, you're making your job easier. Take advantage of that, because what's going to happen if you're spending 8 hours, manually hacking at a keyboard, running around or whatever, and you could squash that 8 hours down to 1 hour. Now you got 7 hours to work on learning a new skill, 3 hours to learn on picking up a certification and improving yourself, maybe also improving the bottom line. But yeah, take advantage of that lax change control if you can.
I want to echo that real quick. One of the things I learned early when I first got into, doing automation and things like that was don't ask for permission, just ask for forgiveness.
Yep.
Because there were people within our in a company that whenever if you would take an idea to them, they would shoot it down regardless, no matter what. Like, oh, no, we can't do that. And sometimes it takes for you to actually show them the value in what you're doing and how it serves the business in order for them to finally see and sign off on that. So even if they, that don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness is, there were some things that when I didn't really know Puppet at all, and I was just automating SSH keys on different servers. Um, my CTO at the time thought that why learn Puppet? It takes longer to learn it than to just copy the SSH keys over to it. But then once it was done, and all we had to do was add SSH keys to Puppet, and it would just put it. Then it started to make more sense to him, and then it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, that. So I just wanted to echo that, and I'll give Tameika some time to speak on this. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to get my mouse back over.
Uh,
So yeah, identifying the pain points, but another thing about identifying the pain points was actually two things, is understanding small wins. All right. So if you can identify the pain points and create small wins across not just you but across the team, that also helps. But the other part is also understanding the skill sets that your team has. When you're making the approach to automate something, my rule of thumb is, if the tool takes me more than 2 weeks to learn it, that's too long.
mm,
And that's based on the skill set that you're looking at it from a senior perspective, and then you're looking at it from a junior perspective. Because if it takes you 2 weeks to figure out, and you may be the strongest link on the team, you can imagine what it's going to take the person who may be considered the weakest link or the less experienced person on the team. So when you go to define, hey, this could be a quick win or low hanging fruit that we can accomplish where I can automate this, choosing the right tool that can be delivered across the team and maybe across multiple teams will kind of guide you towards your solution. The other part of that is understanding what how your sprints look, and how to groom your backlog, how to make user stories. You'll get more into this when you're start doing Scrum, but this is super important, and it's super important in terms of, if you got people who make poor user stories and you're coming away with large points on a story and they're giving you 2 weeks to do a 21 point story, give it up for the band. Just understanding the big picture, breaking it down into small chunks, and then understanding not every tool can be applied to this big picture, right? You may not have one tool that applies to everything. You may have multiple tools that you may use to get the job done. And when I say tools, Bash is a tool, just like Python is a tool. Using a BC calculator versus an online calculator, like those are tools, but understanding how to use those different tools and when to use them is super important. And the only way you're going to know that information is you yourself use the tools, right? You yourself just take some time, spin up a VM in VirtualBox, and say, okay, well, how did I spin up that VM in VirtualBox? Oh, I manually clicked on something and I spun up a VM in VirtualBox. Oh, well, how can I automate that on my own desktop or on my own laptop to spin that up? Just different ways you can think about creating value. One within, I always say, create the value within yourself and then share it out.
and that's a good segue into this last question that I have for everyone. I want everyone, because we're over on time. I just want everyone to take about a minute to answer this, or a minute or less. What is your regimen for improving? You talk about value of of yourself. How do you improve your own value? What's kind of like your regimen on a day to day that you go through to improve yourself?
Well, I
I
looks
go
like
ahead.
I'm the
Go
only
ahead.
one. I was about to say I'm the only one that's unmuted, so I'll start. But I mean, kind of like you touched on, Greg. I listen to podcasts daily, so I try to stay on or stay up to date with what's current in technology,
Mhm.
and I kind of listen to it and see if it's something that my team can take advantage of. If it is, I look for ways to deploy it. And I like to lend myself to other people. I'm really active in the Bit Slack, and I like to see people that come in there with well-defined questions, because I know they're like really, hungry. They're thirsty for the knowledge. And I think that I learn more by helping other people. So I do the research, help them find the information that they need, and lend a hand where I can, so because I'm like, a rising tide raises all ships. So if you learn something, I'm going to learn something too.
So I'll go. I think everybody, if you're in bit, I think you probably see me post something. But I'm usually
No.
what I do. So I have, for me, I sign up for newsletters. And I go through and I pick out what content is in those newsletters, and I actually go through and read them. And then I don't. Some of them I try, some of them I don't. The other thing I also do is I research the author of those newsletters. And the reason why I research the authors of those of whatever content is in that newsletter, because you'll find out they have books, you'll find out they have white papers out there, you'll find out they're giving talks at conferences. So that usually leads down a rabbit hole, but it's a good rabbit hole because now you get a chance to understand like the journey of that author. You also get a chance to understand where you are at. Like, if are you able to understand this person's content who's been in the game 20 or 30 years, and they're presenting this as a new thing, or where an evolution came from. It kind of gives you a gauge for yourself. And the other thing that I also like to do is I usually like to go to YouTube and look up conferences, and not necessarily recent conferences, but I like to look at older conferences. And the reason why I like to look at older conferences is because, again, it's going back to that author. I get a chance to see where, because usually what happens is tech is the new tech that's the tech that's here now was done 10 years ago. So what you get a chance to see is what people were talking about in tech then, and then what you see now. And so you get a chance to, because what you see now is new to us. But at least if you go back and see what they were talking about, you get to see where it came from. You get to see what the thought process was, and now that you see it, you can add value to it, because you can now say, okay, well, now it could take this direction. So now you can contribute to it if you want to, use it if you want to, or whatever. But you get the evolution of it. I think it's always good to go back and see where it came from. Like, does anybody know why Puppet was created? Where did it come from? What is the evolution of Puppet? Not that you're going to need this in an interview, but it gives you a chance to see like the different direction shifts that companies have taken to make their product, and who they've reached out to sell their product, and who has adopted that product. So it gives you that evolution of stages of, and that's how I learn, because now I get the backstory. There's always a why, there's always a how, and there's always a when, and I like to know that whole gamut of it.
It's an excellent answer. I'm stealing some of that. Herman?
I mean, for me, like I said, do projects. This is one of the fields that if you do not have interest in creatively doing your own stuff on your own time, and wanting to actually be wanting to actually create your own processes, then you're not gonna like this job. It's not something that you go to work and you do the work at work. You actually have to want to learn the stuff and learn the concepts at home, and want to try to attempt to build your own stuff. Like when I first started out, I wanted to learn how to build an API server. I opened up Python, got learned Flask, and built my own API server, just with just CRUD calls, create, update, delete calls to it. Um, so for me, that's what keeps me interested, doing various projects, finding interest in new things that I want to learn. Like right now, even for my job. Um, I had a request to automate Active Directory creation. I don't know. I haven't ran Active Directory. Like I haven't built one from scratch. I've only like added people to it or did some kind of troubleshooting. So I actually took the time out to go and actually read um, how to create an Active Directory from scratch, and then figure out how to use the tools to automate it. So you just, for me, just pure interest in various tech skills.
Yeah, I definitely want to piggyback on that because that since the beginning of my tech career, and you can, I mean, just Google, and this is not the beginning, but early on when in my tech career. So if you go out and go to blacksandtechnology.wordpress.com, right? That was the very first Blackstone Technology site. But in that, you'll see, pictures and images of a lab that I had. There was an actual data center in a small company. A friend, me and a friend, we actually used to go there on Saturdays, and we used to buy these air conditioners size servers and rack them up and install VMware on them and build VMs out. We would learn networking like that way and things like that. And to this day, I still have two, you know, PCs downstairs in my basement, one running VMware ESX, another one running Linux for like file storage and things like that, and that I use for various different Linux. I have a Linux laptop just sitting, I can SSH into it and mess around. But I have all these things so that I can at any given time, if I want to spin up a Kubernetes cluster, I can, spin it up on some VMs. If I want to learn, if I want to do some Terraform stuff, I can do that. If I wanted to learn some Ansible stuff, I can do that as well. Like it still pays, at least for me, to kind of have this lab where you can do, and not you don't necessarily need the physical machines because now you can get free tier cloud accounts and things like that. You can spin up things there, and they have all types of platforms now where you can go and spin up like Kubernetes clusters and things like that. But just what I guess the gist of it is just having that lab environment where you can do these projects and where you can work on and hone your skills and learn about the ins and outs of these different technologies. That's what's worked for me, as well as reading and watching videos and being in bit slack and learning from these people on the call, our panelists. Um, and before we get out of here, I want to do two things. First, I want to mention a few books that left off the list. One is Phoenix Project. If you haven't read it, go read it. It reads like a novel. It tells about a company's DevOps journey and all the ups and downs they had throughout that journey. The Devops Handbook, which is it's not a novel. It reads more like a technical book, but it's really good as well. It tells you a lot about ins and outs of DevOps. Unicorn Project, which is actually a sequel to the Phoenix Project, so it reads like a novel as well. A really good continuation of that book. And then Site Reliability Engineer. It's a book put out by, I think some folks from Google put that book out, and it really talks about a lot of the processes, the technical processes and workflows within Google and some of the tooling that they use and things that they built. Because out of Google came Kubernetes, right, and a lot of other great tools. And so it gives you a really good insight as to their operations, their mindset behind how they do things within Google. So those four books are really really good. Before we jump out of here, I want everyone to how can people get in contact with you if they needed to? How can they find you? That type of thing. We'll start with you, Herman, since you're already on the screen.
Um, I guess on Facebook you'll find me, Herman Haggerty. Um, if you're in Slack, I'm DevH3124. If you're in the Blackstone Technology Slack, you can find me mostly there. I'm always on. Um, yeah.
Cool.
For me, I want to add one more book, and that's called Accelerate, and that's by Nicole Forgerson. I think that's how you say her last name.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and also one other thing is learn the different roles on a team, especially if you're doing Scrum. Just learn the different roles so you understand. But in terms of how you find me, is everything women in Linux across the board, all social media, meetup, except for TikTok. I am not on TikTok. I don't tick and I don't talk, so not there. But everything else, yeah.
Excellent. Michael.
Yeah, for me, you can find me on the Blackstone Technology Slack, Michael Jenkins 1906. If there's any of my fraternity brothers out there, you might recognize the numbers at the end. And if you're looking for me on GitHub and social media, I'm Managed Chaos with a K. And you can find me and some of my course material on LinkedIn Learning. Just if you go to LinkedIn Learning, search for DevOps and Michael Jenkins, my courses will pop up.
Excellent. I want to say thank you to Michael, Herman, and Tameika. This was a great discussion. This discussion will go up on YouTube, so it's recorded to go up on YouTube, and I'll put the link out on the Meetup site, and we'll probably blast it out through all of our social media networks as well. So thank you all. Thanks everyone for joining, and don't forget to go out to foundation.blackstonetechnology.net, become a member of Blackstone Technology Foundation. It is free, and that's it. Thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Greg.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you. Peace.